Hello, at 1,000 subscribers, I will make a special series of stories for you. The year was 1873, and summer had gone to iron. Heat wavered over the Arizona canyonlands, turning distance into a mirage that swallowed horses whole and returned them as ripples on the horizon. Cole Tanner rode with his hat pulled low and his shirt stuck to his back, his bay gelding flicking foam from its bit. The country smelled of juniper and dust and old sunburned stone. He had been alone for 9 days, 10 if he counted the day he had lost in a dust storm, and spent crouched beneath a tilted saguaro, waiting for the world to settle. The last town behind him had offered him a sour whiskey, a pile of cold beans, and the sort of silence that follows a man who slept in too many hard places. He left before dawn with his rifle wrapped in oiled cloth, a little tobacco, a tin of grounds, and the quiet resolve to keep moving, because moving was the only thing that kept the past from finding his back. His waterskin sloshed like an accusation. He shook it, listened, and lied to himself. Enough. He'd follow the arroyo another mile, maybe 2, and then turn north for the mesa he'd heard from a surveyor months ago, about a seep tucked in shade up there. But the arroyo fell away into a tangle of boulders and pale grasses, then into a sudden cut where the earth seemed to have opened its mouth and swallowed a river, leaving a scar of dry rock, and rumor got Cole dismounted, boots sinking a finger's depth into powder. The gelding old Sam, for all horses named Sam were expected to outlive their riders, blew and tossed his head. "Easy," Cole said, running a palm along the gelding's neck. "You know water the way I know trouble. Find it." They picked their way down the cut, threading between cottonwoods that had sent roots into cracks, looking for the ghosts of spring. A hummingbird flashed like a green coin, then vanished. A sissertail perched on a branch and scolded a lizard for existing. In the distance, thunder muttered as if embarrassed to be heard. Half an hour later, when the heat felt like a hand at his throat, Cole heard something small and decisive a trickle, a syllable of running water. He stopped and cocked his head. The sound seemed to come from below, not ahead. He scanned the canyon wall. There, a dark seam behind a skirt of chokecherry and willow, the earth damp around it. He tied old Sam to a stubby mesquite, patted the horse's nose. "I'll holler if it's worth hollering," and started down. The ledges were flaky and untrustworthy. Twice he tested handholds, and twice they broke off under their own weight. He took his time and held his breath when the rock scraped under his boot. 30 feet down, the world cooled. He smelled it before he saw it, the green, clean scent of water that hadn't yet learned to be grateful. He pushed through the willow and entered a pocket of shade, so complete it felt like stepping into the memory of evening. The pool itself was no more than a room across, a mirror laid into the rock where the canyon's narrow throat widened. Water fell from a slit overhead in threads as fine as horsehair. It made the soft sounds of small promises kept. He grinned, unexpected, unguarded, and ganned, lifted the waterskin to fill it. He cupped a palm instead and drank, the swallow pulling relief all the way to his shoulders. He splashed his face, and the sweat and grit broke away like old paint. He'd take 2 skins, maybe 3, if he could spare the weight. Then the laughter came. It was soft at first, echoing in a way that made it seem everywhere at once. Not a man's laugh lighter, a braid of sound, more like water's own cousin. Cole froze, palm still dripping, and the laughter turned into a quiet song, half-hummed, half-breathed. The words were unfamiliar, the melody not. It had the rise and fall of a lullaby and the rhythm of walking. He turned his head slowly, careful as a thief, feeling like one. The pool bent away behind a boulder the size of a freight stove, then widened. In that farther basin, in a bowl of light that spilled from the notch above, a woman bathed. She was waist-deep, her back to him, dark hair loose like a raven's wing, tangling and untangling in the falls. Her shoulders gleamed, and the water threw broken stars around her. She lifted her face to the threads and laughed again, a sound without worry. Beside the pool, on a dry, flat rock, lay a folded deerskin dress embroidered in rows of neat, careful triangles, a pair of moccasins, and a knife in a beaded sheath. Cole stepped backward so fast his boot heel skidded. He felt panic shoot through. Him not desire, not even shame first, but the wild alarm of a man who had accidentally walked into a sanctum. He lifted his hands as if to show them empty, as if the canyon itself could see and judge what he was not intending. His heel found nothing. The flat of his back met the willow, then slipped, and he breathed the single syllable men breathe when the ground stops being where they left it. He caught himself on a ledge with his fingertips. The small rocks he'd dislodged clattered, and jumped and plinked into the pool like thrown coins. The woman turned. For 1 second, no more, they stared at each other, two strangers pulled into the same circle of consequence. Cole saw she was young but grown, perhaps 20 summers, the long lines of her cheekbones strong as if carved with a good knife. Her eyes were black and bright, and he had the sudden foolish thought that they looked like evening right before. The first star showed. She clutched her hair to her chest with one arm. With the other, she reached the rock in a blur, fingers closing around the knife's hilt. Cole wrenched his gaze away. He fixed it on a crack in the stone near his boot, and spoke to the crack. "Ma'am," he said, voice low and hoarse, "I'm turning around. Didn't mean to step where I shouldn't. I'll be gone." No offense meant. Stop. Her English was careful, the consonants precise. He obeyed because the word was a command, not a request. He kept his head angled down, sightline pinned to that crack, like a man aiming at it. He heard water sheet. From skin, the quick steps of someone moving with urgency and competence, not fear. He willed his hands to stay at his sides, open, palms forward. "Look," she said, the word had changed. Not a command this time, an invitation to see, but to see correctly. He lifted his eyes only as high as her ankles, then to her knees. She had pulled a deerskin shawl around herself, the knife in her other hand. He raised his gaze to her face and stopped there. Her expression was fire held in clay-contained, shapely, but unquestionably fire. "You came quiet," she said. "But you came." "I came for water," Cole said. "I swear by anything I have left that I didn't know you were here." The knife didn't waver. "You have seen me undressed," she said, and the words that followed landed like stones, dropped into the pool, each with its own ring of consequence. "Now you must marry me, or they will punish us both." The canyon went very still. Even the tiny threads of the falls seemed to thin. Cole opened his mouth, shut it, opened it again. He had been ambushed before, by Kiowa in tall grass, and by debt in a mining camp, and by loneliness in a hotel room, with a window that looked across at another window. Another man alone, but never by a sentence like this. "Ma'am," he said, softly, "that's a large step from a small misfortune." Her chin lifted. "It is not small. It is everything." She chose the next words with care, as if laying out a line of beads she could not afford to spill. "My people hold ways that keep us alive when others would see us gone. Some ways are hard, some are heavy. This is a way. A breath. I am a woman. I am not a child. You saw what you should not see. If they learn this, they will say I am. Shamed, and you are an enemy's hand. Blood would answer. Or marriage will bind the harm." Asterisk, "I can walk away," he said, and hated how untrue it sounded even to his own ears. "You can try," she said, not unkindly. "But the canyon keeps secrets badly. Footprints tell. Your horse tells. My sisters saw you ride this way. My brothers follow any strange dust. If they find us, They will not ask your mouth for answers. You are in our land, and we do not have time for men who talk first. Cole felt the canyon tilt again, not under his boots this time, but in his chest. He had ridden through 100 miles of country, and never once considered that the land he crossed belonged to anyone but the land itself. Then he remembered the surveyor with the rolled maps and the fine boots, and how he had spoken of parcels and deeds, the way a gambler spoke of cards, things he might hold that had never belonged to him. He took a breath. "What do you call the place beyond that ridge?" he asked, nodding toward the mouth of the pocket where the world flared white. She blinked, as if she had expected a different question. "We call it the place where the rain sleeps." "And the stone ledge there?" "Ledge that catches coats." The corner of her mouth twitched, not a smile yet, something like the memory of one. "That," Cole said, "is more naming than any map has ever done for me." He set his hat in his hands and felt the thin edge of humor, the kind that keeps a man's blood from running too cold. "All right, you don't know me, and I don't know you. But we can say true things to each other. Here is my first. I didn't come to bring hurt to you or yours. Second, I do not take lightly the word marry. Third, I am—" He stopped. He had almost said tired, which was true and useless. He chose instead, willing to listen. She studied him as if he were a track she was measuring for weight and speed. The knife lowered a thumb's breadth. "What is your name?" she asked. He hesitated a heartbeat, as if the name might put a shape around him that would be harder to slip out of later. "Cole Tanner." She repeated it once, as if tasting the feel of it. Cole. The word sounded less like a rock and more like a bird in her mouth. "I am." She cut herself short, a decision flickering across her face. "It does not matter. Not yet." He nodded to that. "It'll matter when you want it to." The knife point dipped toward the rock, then rose again. "If we speak more," she said, "it must be soon. I come here to wash and be alone. My mother thinks I am weaving. My sister will look. The sun there." She flicked her eyes to the notch. "When it sits on that stone like an egg, they come to call. We have the time between now and then." Cole glanced. The sun balanced on the edge of a slab of sandstone that jutted into blue like the prow of a ship. He judged an hour, maybe less. He had made worse bargains under worse clocks. "All right," he said. "Tell me what a marriage would mean." "Your way, not the preacher with a bell. What you mean?" "You would stand with me," she said simply. "You would not leave me when others looked. You would carry water when my mother said the pots were empty. You would listen to our elders when they speak about the old things. You would not make me small. You would not let others make me small. I would do the same with you in my way." He swallowed. It sounded like a lot, and exactly the right amount. "And if I say no?" She looked past him out toward the glare. "And you will run, and my brothers will follow. And even if you are fast and lucky for a day, the day after that, we'll ask again if you are fast. It is a long land. We are many feet." He could feel the old habit stirring in him, the one that had kept him alive, when he chose to be neither the man in blue nor the man he had been before the blue. Slip, evade, shrug off. The trail was an old friend who forgave cowardice if you named it caution. He could scramble back to old Sam, swing up, and whisper apology to a woman whose face he would try to forget, and put as many miles as the sun let him between himself and a promise that wasn't yet a promise. But then he looked at her straight on again and saw that she watched him without begging and without threat beyond what the land itself already carried. He saw the deerskin shawl's wet edge dripping onto the rock and the careful beadwork on the sheath, and the way her hair, even half covered and matted by water, held its own authority. He thought of the silence in the last saloon and of all. The miles that had meant nothing, and of a small, improbable sentence. You would not make me small. He let out a breath he had held since the war. I can walk back up and call down to you what I decide, he said. You can keep your knife until you believe me. You will climb careful, she said. It was not a question. Always do. He turned and found the first handhold then. The second. The stone was hot where the sun touched it and cool where the canyon kept its secret. He didn't look down until he reached the lip. When he did, the pool looked like a coin again. Old Sam tossed his head when Cole came through the willow, as if to say that water had been proven. So where was the water? Cole filled the skin, then filled it again, then turned it and let some pour down the horse's neck. Hush, he told the gelding, as much to himself as to the animal. We've got decisions to have. He took his hat off and stared at the rim of the canyon, at the sky so bright it seemed intent on burning a hole through his doubts. He had lost men under that sky, lost bits of himself in towns that had no names worth remembering. He had not been offered much lately that felt like a thing a man could put his back against and breathe easy. And now, in the shade of a pocket, of stone with a willow for a curtain, he had been offered something heavy and exacting. He put the hat back on and went to his knees at the edge. The woman waited below, the knife in her hand, the shawl dark where it still held water. He did not let himself look at her except as a person with a choice on the table. All right, he called down, voice even. I won't run. The knife did not move. You will marry? She said. I will come with you to hear how it's done, he said. I will stand and speak, if speaking is the price of not bringing harm. I will learn your way before I break it by accident. If that's what you mean by marry, then, he paused only long enough to make sure the word wouldn't fail him. Then yes. A heat he could not name moved through his chest. Not the sun, not the fear of what might follow, something else. Down below, she stood as if the ground had steadied under both their feet at once. The knife lowered until its point tapped the rock, a tiny ceremonial sound, then climbed down again, she said. There is a path that goes west. It is hidden to someone who does not know it. She tilted her chin toward a crease in the sheer wall he had taken for a shadow. I will dress. You will keep your eyes on the rock and the sky. We will go to my people. When we reach them, you will say your name, and that you are not a man who breaks ways. And you will not speak more than you must. I can do quiet, Cole said. I believe you can, she answered, and turned away, trusting him with her back as she moved to where the shawl lay. He turned his face to the wall and counted heartbeats and knots in the sandstone. Above the pool, a hawk sketched a slow circle, more patience than wings. The sun's edge kissed the flat top of the prow-like stone, and a beam slid into the pocket, laying a bright stripe across water and rock, and the space between two strangers. Cole Tanner let the light pass over him and into him, as if it might leave a mark he could feel later when the dark came. When she spoke again, her voice was closer, her step sure. Come, she said, there is still shade on the path, and there are things you must learn before the egg of the sun sits. He climbed down the first few feet, and found the hidden path where her finger had pointed. It was there, like a secret that had always been true, a narrow stair pressed into the stone by feet that had trusted it for generations. He followed her into a crease in the canyon wall that swallowed heat and gave back the cool breath of the earth. He knew a man could be dragged or he could walk. He also knew there was a third way, rarer, harder. A man could choose to be led. Cole Tanner chose, and the canyon, which was bad at keeping secrets, carried his choice on its breath. Behind him, old Sam shook flies from his withers and waited, patient as a good witness. Ahead, Between the folds of rock, a young Apache woman grown, unafraid guided a stranger whose name she had spoken only once toward a camp, when names were weighed and measured like stones for building dot as they went, with the sun balancing. On its stone, Cole understood that the words she had thrown like a net at his feet were already pulling tight. You've seen me undressed. Now you must marry me, or they'll punish us both. He did not pick at the net. He set his hands against it and tested its strength, the way a man tests a rope before he trusts it with his life. Then he walked on. They reached the Apache encampment by dusk, when the sky was the color of burnt copper, and the mesquite trees threw long shadows across the valley floor. The camp spread along a bend in the arroyo, with wickiups shaped like bent willows and hides, patched with smoke-dark stitching. Children chased each other barefoot through the dust, their laughter sharp against the hush of evening. Men returned from hunting with rabbits strung across their shoulders, and women gathered mesquite beans in baskets, grinding them into meal. With rhythmic strokes, Cole Tanner rode into the camp beside Nayeli, who walked with her chin high, her shawl drawn close. Her people's eyes followed them. Some looked at him with curiosity, others with anger, and a few with that hard, narrowed expression that Cole knew well. It was the way soldiers once looked at men who might not obey orders. He felt the weight of those stares as if they were stones stacked on his chest. Old Sam flicked his ears nervously, sensing the hostility as plain as smoke. A man approached, tall and broad-shouldered, his braids bound with strips of red cloth. His face was lined by the desert wind, but his gaze was sharp as obsidian. He carried himself like a man accustomed to authority. Nayeli bowed her head. "Father," she said. Cole stiffened. This was the elder, then the one whose word could shape life or death in the camp. The elder studied Cole, taking in his dust-caked boots, his patched shirt, the rifle at his saddle. He did not look impressed. "This man," he said in Apache, his voice like gravel rolling down a dry creek. Nayeli answered him quickly, words tumbling out in their native tongue. Cole caught only fragments, but the tone was urgent. At last, the elder looked back at him and spoke in English. "My daughter says you saw what only a husband should see." His expression hardened. "Is this true?" Cole swallowed. His throat felt dry despite the waterskin heavy at his belt. Lying would be useless. This man's eyes were the kind that sifted truth from dust. "It was by accident," he said slowly. "But yes, it's true." Murmurs rippled through the people gathered nearby. Cole's hand itched for the rifle strapped to his saddle, but he forced himself still. He had fought men before, dozens, at once, but here he was one man against a whole village. The elder's jaw flexed. "Then by our ways, her honor must be restored. You must bind yourself to her as husband. If you refuse, your blood will answer." Cole looked at Nayeli. She met his gaze squarely, no trace of hesitation in her eyes. She had not exaggerated. Earlier, this was no empty threat. If he tried to run, the whole tribe would follow, and his trail would end red. For a long moment, the canyon wind sighed through the mesquite branches. Finally, Cole nodded. "Then I'll stand by her. I'll marry her, if that's what it takes." The elder's face did not soften, but he gave the smallest of nods. He lifted his hand, and two men stepped forward, carrying strips of rawhide and a small clay bowl filled with ash and sage. The people gathered in a wide circle. A fire was lit, its flames painting the crowd in bronze and shadow. Cole felt the Sioux air tighten with expectation, as if the desert itself leaned in to witness. The elder stood between Cole and Nayeli, raising the rawhide strips. "By our ways," he said, "marriage is not a man's word alone, nor a woman's. It is two lives, tied so that one cannot be moved without the other." This bond is heavy. It is not broken by distance or by time. He tied the rawhide around Cole's wrist, and Nayeli's, binding them together. The leather was rough, biting into Cole's skin. He felt the heat of her pulse through the cord. Steady and strong. By fire, by earth, by the blood of your ancestors, you are one. The elder sprinkled ash from the bowl over their joined hands, the scent of sage rising with the sparks. Cole stared at the firelight flickering in Nayeli's eyes. She did not look away. Her face was fierce, unyielding, yet beneath it he saw something else, a quiet fear, hidden but not gone. She had been forced into this as much as he had. The crowd murmured again, this time with approval. Women nodded, children whispered, and the men crossed their arms, but did not reach for weapons. The tension eased, but Cole knew it had not vanished. It had only been set aside, waiting to return at the first sign of betrayal. When the ritual ended, Nayeli's father spoke once more. You are bound to her now, white man. If you fail her, you fail us all. And failure is death. Cole nodded grimly. He had taken oaths before, in army camps where drums beat like thunder, in smoky saloons where debts were carved into wood with knives. Those vows had broken, like everything else. But this one had teeth. That night, as the camp settled, Cole and Nayeli sat beneath the crooked arms of a mesquite tree at the edge of the firelight. They were still tied by the wrist, the rawhide strip unyielding. The desert wind carried the smell of smoke and roasting rabbit. Coyotes yipped in the now. Distance, a chorus to the stars overhead. Nayeli spoke first, her voice quiet but sharp. You chose to stay. I didn't have much choice, Cole muttered. There is always choice, she said, turning her eyes on him. But not always courage. Cole let out a breath, staring at the fire's glow against the night. I've run from a lot of things in my life. Maybe I'm tired of running. For the first time since they met, Nayeli's lips curved into the faintest smile. It was small, almost hidden, but it lit her face like a flame in the dark. They sat in silence after that, their wrists bound, their lives tangled. Two strangers tied by accident and custom beneath a mesquite tree. And though the desert night stretched wide around them, Cole Tanner felt the circle of fate close tighter, like rawhide pulling snug on the skin. The days after the marriage bound Cole Tanner to the Apache camp passed in a haze of suspicion, testing, and silence. He quickly learned that being tied by rawhide to Nayeli was only the beginning. To her people, words were light. Deeds were stone. Every morning before dawn, the camp stirred to life. Women ground mesquite pods into flour. Children fetched water from the arroyo. Hunters slipped out with bows and rifles to scan the mesas for deer. Cole, unused to such rhythm, was given tasks to prove himself. He carried water jars from the spring. He split mesquite wood until his shoulders ached. He walked beside Nayeli's brothers, who eyed him as if measuring where best to strike if he faltered. Nayeli herself remained sharp, distant, yet not unkind. She corrected him when he misstepped in custom. She explained words in her language fire. Water, horse, husband with patience that was neither soft nor cruel, only exact. Cole found himself listening, repeating, stumbling, and trying again. He had fought in war, worked cattle drives, dug silver from mountains. But this was a trial measured not in blood spilled, but in persistence, in humility. Still, the unease never left. Whispers followed him when he walked through camp. The Apache were a proud people, and though custom had spared his life, it had not won him trust. More than once, he caught sight of young warriors running fingers across arrowheads while staring at him. Their meaning clear enough. Cole Tanner knew. When a man was tolerated only because killing him was inconvenient. The storm gathers, it was on. The 5th day that he first saw the dust. At dawn, he had gone with 2 hunters to gather prickly pear from a flat ridge. As they rode, Cole shaded his eyes against the sunrise and noticed a smear of brown rising in the east, faint but certain. A column of dust, steady, deliberate. Not a herd, not storm. Riders, many of them. He said nothing at first, but his gut turned cold. He had seen such dust before in Arkansas, in Texas, in places where blue coats rode with sabers shining. He had buried too many memories under whiskey, but they came back sharp now by midday. The hunters noticed too. One spat into the dirt. They? Other muttered a curse, words bitter as cactus milk. They returned to camp at once. The alarm spread quickly. Scouts confirmed it. A unit of U.S. cavalry, 30 riders, moving straight through Apache land. Their banners caught the sun like shards of fire. Cole sat on a rock outside Nayeli's wickiup, running his thumb along the scarred wood of his rifle stock. His chest felt like a drum. He had no loyalty left for the army. He had deserted after the war, tired of killing for orders, shouted by men who never bled. But he knew what the cavalry brought. Violence, demands, camps forced into barren lands where nothing grew. He also knew someone among them. Captain Wilkes. The name rose like bile. Cole had ridden beside him once, back when uniforms still meant something. Wilkes had been sharp, ambitious, willing to sacrifice men to win a skirmish. He had despised the Apache, calling them ghosts with teeth. Cole remembered the night. Wilkes had laughed over a fire about how one day they would clear this desert like sweeping dust from a porch. If Wilkes commanded this column, the Apache were in grave danger. Between two worlds that evening, Nayeli found Cole sharpening, his knife beside the fire. Her hair was tied back, her face streaked with ash from the ceremonial smoke women burned to ward off misfortune. She sat beside him, folding her legs, her eyes searching his face. "You know these men," she said. It was not a question. Cole nodded. "I rode with them a long time ago. Different war. Same faces. Will they fight us?" "Wilkes will." He spat into the dust. "He don't see people. Just land he thinks should belong to the flag." Nayeli studied him in silence. Finally, she said, "You wear their skin." She touched the sleeve of his faded blue shirt, once an army coat before he had cut it down. "But you fight against them?" "I wear what I've got," Cole said gruffly. He stared at the knife in his hands. "But I don't belong to them. Not anymore. Not ever again." She tilted her head. "And you belong to us?" The question struck like an arrow. Belong. The word was heavy, binding, dangerous. He wanted to say no. He wanted to say he was still just passing through. But the rawhide scar on his wrist, where it had cut into his skin, told another story. He thought of the mesquite tree, the fire, the elder's voice. Failure is death. "Belong where I stand," Cole said at last. It was the only truth he could manage. Nayeli nodded once, as if that answer would do for now. The approach. At dawn the next day, the cavalry arrived. The ground shook with hooves. Blue uniforms gleamed in the sun. 30 riders in formation, rifles at the ready, their horses snorting clouds of dust. The Apache camp braced itself, women pulling children into the shadows, men gripping bows and muskets, warriors lining the ridge with arrows nocked. Cole stood among them, his rifle cradled, his heart pounding like war drums. And then he saw him. Captain Wilkes rode at the head, his mustache trimmed sharp, his coat clean despite the dust. His posture was rigid, his eyes hard. When his gaze swept the camp, it snagged on Cole like a hook. "Well, I'll be damned," Wilkes called, reining in his horse. His voice carried, cruel and amused. "Cole Tanner. Thought you were rotting in some ditch." Cole spat into the dust. "Not yet." Wilkes's grin widened. And now look at you, living among savages, wearing their dirt, sleeping in their huts. You've gone native, Tanner. His eyes flicked to Nayeli, who stood behind Cole, unflinching. And married too. My. How far the mighty have fallen. Cole's hands tightened on his rifle. The Apache bristled, murmurs rising like a va. Storm Wind. Wilkes raised his hand, signaling his men. Rifles angled forward. The message was clear. These people can't stay here, Wilkes barked. Orders are orders. This land belongs to the United States. They'll move to the reservation, or they'll be cleared off. You know how it goes, Tanner. You've ridden with us. Cole's voice was low, steady, dangerous. Not anymore. For a moment, the world held its breath. The Apache warriors along the ridge drew their bows. Cavalry rifles clicked into place. The desert wind carried the smell of mesquite smoke and sweat and fear. Cole Tanner knew he stood between two worlds, each demanding blood. And when the first shot was fired, because it would be fired, sooner or later, he would have to choose once and for all where he belonged. The standoff broke the desert wide open. For one heartbeat, the world was still. The Apache perched along the ridge like shadows cut from stone, bows drawn taut. The cavalrymen lined in formation, rifles angled, blue coats burning in the sun. And in the middle, Cole Tanner stood with his rifle across his chest, the rawhide scar on his wrist itching, as though it remembered the oath. Beneath the mesquite dot, it was Captain Wilkes who shattered the silence. He barked a laugh, the kind of laugh that made men uneasy. You've lost your wits, Tanner. You'd stand with them against your own blood? Cole spat into the dust. Blood don't mean much when it's been spilled for the wrong cause. Wilkes's grin dropped like a coin into a well. He straightened in his saddle, raised his hand. Then you'll die with them. The first shot rang out. No one knew from which side. An Apache arrow hissed through the air at the same moment a cavalry rifle cracked. The ridge exploded with movement. Horses screamed. Warriors shouted war cries that echoed against the canyon walls, and the sharp smell of gunpowder swallowed the scent of sage. Cole hit the dirt, rolling behind a boulder, and snapped his rifle to his shoulder. A cavalryman broke formation, charging forward with saber flashing. Cole squeezed the trigger. The man fell from his horse like a sack of grain. Smoke stung Cole's eyes, but he reloaded quick, hands moving on instinct learned in war. Above, the Apache warriors rained arrows and musket fire. The cavalry responded with disciplined volleys, their rifles spitting fire in unison. The air filled with the hiss of arrows, the crack of bullets, the scream of men and beasts. Cole fought with a fury he hadn't known he carried. Each shot he fired was not for land or flag, but for survival, for Nayeli, for the people who had bound him to their fire. Twice he thought he saw her on the edge of battle, darting between wickiups to pull children to safety, her shawl trailing like a banner. A bullet clipped his hat, tearing it clean off his head. Another split the rock by his cheek, sending stone shards into his skin. He ducked, cursed, reloaded, fired again. His world narrowed to sights and sounds. The heavy kick of the rifle, the sharp taste of blood on his lip, the smell of sweat and smoke. The duel through the haze of chaos. Cole saw Wilkes. The captain sat high in the saddle, barking orders, saber flashing like lightning. He was a storm at the center of the fight, cutting down an Apache warrior with a swing, firing his revolver with the other hand. Cole felt a fire crawl into his chest. The years of silence between them burned away, leaving only the truth. It had always been leading to this. He rose from cover, rifle in hand, and charged through the dust. Wilkes spotted him. Their eyes locked, two ghosts of an old war recognizing each other across the gulf of betrayal. Tanner! Wilkes roared. I should have left you in the mud where you belonged. Cole raised his rifle. Wilkes kicked his horse forward, saber arcing down. The blade struck the rifle barrel, sparks flying. Cole dropped the weapon, drew his Colt, and fired point blank. The bullet tore through Wilkes's shoulder. He screamed, nearly toppled from the saddle, but rage kept him upright. He swung the saber again, catching Cole across the ribs. Pain flared white-hot, staggering him to one knee. Wilkes loomed above, blood streaming down his arm, face twisted in fury. "You're?" "Nothing, Tanner. Nothing but a coward hiding behind savages." Cole gritted his teeth, raised the revolver again, and put a second bullet through Wilkes's chest. This time the captain fell. He hit the ground hard, saber clattering beside him, eyes wide with disbelief as dust swallowed his last breath. Cole staggered, pressing a hand to his bleeding side. His vision blurred, but he stayed standing. Around him, the cavalry began to break. Without their captain, their formation faltered. Apache warriors pressed the advantage, driving them back with whoops and arrows. Horses screamed as soldiers wheeled around, retreating into the open desert. The battle was over. The Apache had won for now. The aftermath silence rolled in, broken only by the moans of the wounded and the crackle of flames where a wickiup smoldered. The ground was littered with spent casings, broken arrows, and the still forms of men who would never rise again. Cole dropped to one knee, the weight of the fight crashing over him. Blood soaked his shirt where Wilkes's saber had cut deep. His breath came ragged. Nayeli appeared beside him, her shawl streaked with dust and blood not her own. She knelt, pressing her hands to his wound, her touch firm and steady. "You fought for us," she said softly, her eyes searching his. "I fought for you." Cole rasped, his voice low but clear. The truth of it steadied him, stronger than any oath he'd ever spoken. "Maybe I didn't mean to marry you that day in the canyon, but I reckon meaning don't count as much as truth. And the truth is, I ain't running anymore." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she smiled, not the sharp, guarded look she had worn before, but something softer, fierce in its warmth. The surviving warriors gathered, some nodding, others still wary, but none lifting their weapons against him. Nayeli's father approached, his expression unreadable. He looked from Cole to his daughter, then to the fallen body of Captain Wilkes in the dust. "You chose," the elder said. "Now you are one of us, by blood as well as bond. Remember, this, to fight with us, is to share our fate." Cole nodded, grim but resolute. "I reckon I knew that when I pulled the trigger." The vow fulfilled that night, the camp gathered beneath the mesquite trees, firelight flickering against the canyon walls. They sang songs of victory, of mourning, of survival. The air was thick with the scent of sage and smoke. Cole sat beside. Nayeli, his ribs bound, her hand resting lightly on his. They did not speak much. They didn't need to. The rawhide that had once bound them was gone, but something stronger remained out as the stars spread wide above the desert sky. Cole Tanner understood that the trail he had always followed, empty towns, lonely roads, the endless urge to keep moving had ended here. Not in a place, but in a vow. A vow spoken not beneath a preacher's bell, but beneath the crooked arms of a mesquite tree. A vow sealed not by rings or papers, but by blood, battle, and the fierce fire of survival and for the first time in years, Cole Tanner felt that he belonged.